Hannah, one of the things that has been really interesting about doing this podcast and talking to lots of people is learning more about sort of the isolation, the disconnection, the loneliness that people experience. And I know that that was one of the driving forces for us in starting the Are We Happy Yet podcast was people are not feeling connected. They're feeling isolated. They're got lots of anxiety and depression. How much of that is because they're out of community, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny because I remember us having conversations like years ago just about how mental health really blew up during COVID, like at least mental health care, right? Like seemed like everyone had a therapist. Therapists were on really long waiting lists. It was hard to get in to see anyone. And I think that was the first, at least big indicator for me as a therapist. Oh, like this goes hand in hand. But the more we're learning about it through this podcast and the more conversations we're having, I think that's such a through line, even with guests that have not like talked about it explicitly. A through line to feeling happier and grounded and safe is having solid, secure connections, right? And so we have the Hey Birdie girls on today to talk about how they have turned that into a wonderful offering for folks, that they don't have to plan anything or be in charge of anything. They can just show up to a variety of their offerings and experience community. I just think it's so, so important.
I do too. And it was really fun to have them back and go even a level deeper with the conversation about disconnection and loneliness and how it's almost feels like it's getting harder and harder every year to stay connected and be in community. And especially COVID affected that, but also technology and just the way that our lives are set up. And you're so right. It's a through line for so many of the people that we talk to, regardless of the topic they come in to talk about. And it's also, there's all these studies, right? Like the quality of your connections is probably more important than so many of the other things we focus on, these like individual isolated things that we focus on with our health and our mental health. Yeah. We were kind of looking at some of the stats and found some wild things. Like in 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General reported or sort of labeled loneliness as an epidemic, with over 50% of adults reporting measurable loneliness. And my guess is that's even a little bit underreported, right? But that's half the population saying they can palpably feel their loneliness.
Yeah.
It's with them.
I was just having dinner with a friend the other night, and we were talking about a cult, and like
you were talking about a cult with a friend. I'm so surprised.
It's like all I talk about is cults. All I listen to is cults. But the thing that's so fascinating to them is I had this conversation with a friend, and we were like, it's interesting because we're also infatuated by it and we think it's so crazy and weird and they do all these weird things. But actually, like, it makes a ton of sense that you would join would join a cult, right? I mean, this thing is promising you being seen and heard, a part of something bigger than you, all of things that are missing in like our Western culture. Dude, it makes so much sense.
It does. And this is like the 5th time I've heard you say you would join a cult. So we are going to keep very close eyes on you. Because I promise you can feel community and connected without a cult. So I've got my eyes on you. And
if I start like giving all my money to someone and wearing like a velour tracksuit, just call my mom and see if I'm okay.
Okay, we've all been warned. Otherwise,
but for real, don't you think, like, all jokes aside, they promise something, and the reason people get so hooked in is because they promise something we all want, which is like to be a part of something bigger than us.
For sure. And this conversation we had with Heather and Jess really highlights this like yearning, right? That we have like an emptiness, a longing to be connected. They talk about doing it in healthy ways, and they've got some ideas for everybody. So I think people will really enjoy listening to this episode.
Me too. Such a good one. And they have so many fun and cool and interesting events coming up. And so they'll talk about that in this episode. So anyone who is looking for a community and doesn't want to join a cult, there is an option for you.
Enjoy. Welcome to Are We Happy Yet?
I'm Hannah Buzzo, licensed therapist.
I'm Jane Thatcher-Hahn, licensed clinical social worker. We're not just friends, we're therapists who have been working with our clients on improving their mental health and relationships for years. Coupled with our own life experiences, we found ourselves in a conundrum. As mental health becomes less stigmatized and conversations about healing, self-help, and personal growth have gone mainstream, why are more and more Americans reporting lower life satisfaction and increased mental health issues with each passing year?
The question kept nagging at us. Despite the growing openness around mental health, why are we seeing an increase in anxiety, depression, and isolation?
It's baffling, right? We're all diving into therapy, self-help, psychedelics, meditation, life hacks, you name it. But the sense of connection and well-being seems to be slipping away, no matter what we do.
So Jane and I got curious about the bigger picture, how creativity, politics, technology, work, spirituality, culture, and more impact our well-being. Our goal is to spark open, relatable conversations about these topics. Through unfiltered discussions, a few uncomfortable truths, we'll have lots of laughter and lightheartedness along the way. Join us each week as we dig deep into these questions, share insights, and try to understand what will truly, finally, make us happy.
Let's go. Welcome back to the Are We Happy Yet podcast. We love having repeat guests. Sometimes you talk with some folks and you love the conversation and you just want to hear more from them, and our audience wants to hear more from them. So we are very excited to have the Hey Birdie duo back with us today. Hey, Heather. Hey, Jess.
Hey, hey.
Welcome back.
Hey.
Well, so happy to have you back. It's springtime now. There's new offerings that you guys all have. Lots has happened in the world since we've talked with you. So we're excited to reconnect. For those who haven't heard of you before or need a little refresher on what Hey Birdie is, tell us a little bit about what Hey Birdie is, and then we can talk a little bit about how you got there and how you created this wonderful offering in the world.
We curate programming for women and teens. This programming is rooted in our programming pillars of connection, compassion, and curiosity. So essentially, when you commit to any kind of Hey Birdie program, whether it be an annual commitment in the Flight Club experience or one of our signature events like the Maternal Burn or the Power of Pleasure, you are invited to show up exactly as you are in that moment, and whatever that means. So we invite women to show up and set aside their assigned or chosen roles and get really curious about what they want to explore or what they want to experience more of in their life.
So you've got lots of offerings. Before we jump more into that, why don't you tell us the question that's on your mind, Jess, which is how you came together, how it started.
The way you teed it up, we're going to do this one and then that one.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, you first and then I'll be ready. And I was thinking about this on our website. We have a story that we created that Heather picked me up hitchhiking in Wyoming. And we did run in, a woman did say, is that story true? And we were like, that's amazing. I love that you're asking that question and I wish it were true.
It's not true?
No, I mean, I lived in Wyoming. That part is true. Heather would probably pick me up, but it didn't happen that way. But so it made me start thinking about like how I envisioned the way that we started. And to set the scene, we were volunteering at our youngest. They were 2 at the time. They're 11 now, at their preschool co-op. Or like preschool. I like to think that we were lounging in the playground, sipping on martinis and smoking cigarettes. It's totally how, like, in my body, what was happening.
Love that.
But we probably were like tending boogies and handing out apple juice boxes, and that's probably what we were drinking. But really, it came down to that moment of recognizing in each other that we were wanting more. And how scary that can be to say out loud to somebody else. And especially at that time, we didn't really know each other. Wow. But to say to someone else, like, do you want fucking more too? Am I seeing me and you? Are you this? Is this happening? Because we were both still holding our careers with like 1 foot in that world, 1 foot in volunteering at co-op and trying to be a mother and a community member and a good human friend. And we weren't receiving the level of satisfaction that we wanted to in that time of our lives because we had taken everything that we had and put it externally. And we weren't feeding our own fire, our own fuel by exploring our curiosities, developing connection to ourselves and with each other. And this was probably our first indication of compassion of, whoa, I'm missing from this equation of life. How do I bring myself back into it? And with Heather and I's previous experiences and kind of being chronic community builders, being one of 4 sisters each, like we just had that pack mentality and the accountability that comes within that. And so in order to make ourselves accountable to our own curiosity, we're like, well, let's invite other women to explore their curiosities. So 9 years ago, we started our women's group called The Whole Shebang, and we still meet on the fourth Thursday of every month. And initially it was an open invitation of, hey, let's come invite you to explore our list of curiosities. And it just so happens it's very similar to their list. But then as we got past that surface level of exploration, we realized that there was so much more, that we were developing this level of connection with each other that was sacred and tender. And so rather than it being an open container, we closed it. And there's 11 of us that still meet. And once we closed that container, of course, supply and demand, people were like, wait, I want back in. And we're like, you can't, because there's commitment and there's safety that we've created in this space. And so we would get those asks probably, I don't know, 3-4 times a year of women saying, well, can I come back in? And it wasn't until the pandemic when we were told no connection in person that we realized that's everything. So if we're missing it within our community, our women's circle, how many other women are out there feeling this level of isolation and not knowing what to do or not knowing how to create their own thing? And that was when Hey Birdie was birthed 4 years ago this June, where it's so funny, right? That initially Heather and I were like, let's do it as a podcast because of the rules. And then we started looking into microphones. I mean, it was as simple as a microphone. And we're like, we can't do this. We can't do a microphone. And thank goodness that didn't happen because it brought us to where we are today. Like, let's do what we're good at and what's accessible for us. That's where we came from.
So what you're saying, Jess, is like you guys had this big idea or even like this need, right? Like, okay, we're noticing that there needs to be something out there for women who want to connect and get just outside of their roles. And even the interesting thing, if I'm hearing you right, is like you even went through this process of like it had to fit into these molds that already existed, like a podcast or whatever, because Hey Birdie is so different than anything else I've done or even know is out there. So what was it like to create a whole new idea?
I feel like that's generous, Hannah, because sometimes we're like, why isn't everyone doing this? And we don't put put value in what we're doing and that it is such a unique idea. So thank you for seeing that and saying that. There's a lot of freedom and it's scary. Yeah. Heather, do you want to say more on that?
I think it's this consistent invitation to get really curious. And it's something that we do often when we launch a new fight club is offer deep, deep gratitude to those for saying yes, because it continues to provide this validation for us that this works and this is something that we want. So it's like this continual invitation to us to keep getting more curious, to keep our imaginations alive and seeking joy and wonder on the daily so that we can pass it on. So I think it's that. I think it's meeting with our women's group month after month and knowing that we weren't losing any momentum and what could happen if more women said yes and this resonated with others. That continual feedback loop is that the secret ingredient is remaining curious.
What do y'all think is one of the secret ingredients of keeping a community engaged or keeping people engaged in a group or a community? Because I hear what you're saying, Heather, like the momentum is such an important piece. I can't tell you how many groups I've been a part of that like fall apart after the first meeting or whatever. So what are y'all's experiences with keeping communities engaged?
Hannah, your point about after the first meeting, groups falling apart, we were very, very intentional in how we structure our flight clubs so that they have the structure of sustainability. So they have their full calendar. It's on the same day and time every month for the year. And that just helps people regulate their schedule and their nervous system of, okay, I can be there. To your question on how to keep them engaged, we can do so much for that, right? Like knowing that they have 12 connections they've committed to helps. Telling them that commitment is a part of making this work. But the biggest part is connection. So we only get to offer them time together 2 hours a month. In order for the connection to be sustainable and strong, they need to commit to interacting with each other beyond that as well. So there's only, right? Like we only have that 2 hours to really help them root into each other, but then offer that invitation of them continuing to integrate with each other.
It's almost like you are fighting against a lot of external factors that keep us from these ongoing communities that would serve us, right? Like there's so many, I think historically humans had more of this stuff, was easier to access, right? We lived in community in such a different way. And now there seems like a lot of barriers. So I can see why there would be so much extra planning, right? To actually get women together in groups and focused on curiosity and community and connection and compassion.
Mm-hmm. Jane, I like what you said about, or I want to talk about what you said, that there was more access.
Yeah.
It wasn't even so much that it was access, it was part of living.
It was just
community was living. It was, it wasn't separate. And when you think back to, I don't know the exact turning point, but my childhood, you kept what happened in your home.
Mm-hmm.
You did not talk about that outside.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I don't know when that transition changed, where like when something was hard or someone was sick in family, you went to your community for that support. I don't know what was happening in history at that point, but when it became, no, we do it ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I am like flying off the cuff with no reason to have any authority on this, but I would guess like the Industrial Revolution was part of that, right? Technology, the technological revolution was part of that. Yeah. So interesting.
Well, and that's part of the whole thing, Jane, that we, even with this podcast, right? Like, okay, we're more connected than ever. We have access to people all over the world, but that's not real. I think you guys even said it on the last podcast, faux connection. It's not real connection. And so it's actually like isolating us and keeping us from really connecting.
Mm-hmm. When you guys made that connection in the playground over, I'm going to stick with the wine and cigars or whatever it was.
The cigarettes?
Yeah.
That's what I was hoping to. I was like,
you guys still crave smoking a cigarette. I got to be honest.
Oh, girl, right?
Go smoke a cigarette and work this out.
You both come to this moment, you say, I'm craving more. I want more. And then as you build that, obviously other women are like feeling that emptiness or feeling that craving. Like if you were to, can you whittle it down? Like what are we craving? What are we missing?
I think we're missing ourselves. Like we're living in this time of all these things, these ideas of what we should and could be you were just going there, Hannah, as far as connectedness. And with so much anxiety and fear and doubt always kind of surfacing, like that's the indication of disconnection. And when all of that is present, so we're disconnected from our bodies, from the earth, from our community, and so much of that comes to surface. I landed on something the other day that said something about the amount of the way that anxiety is showing up in our children today, like on the average, is actually what it took in the 50s to institutionalize a child. So like what we're dealing with right now was considered like mental health hospitalization back in the 50s.
Wow.
So I think it's that disconnection. I think we want to experience more of ourselves and feel really rooted and grounded in that, like I am. And so something we talk a lot about in our programming is this like uninhibited, authentic self-expression. And really knowing this is who I am. This is what I love. This is how I like to be. This is how I like to speak. This is how I like to sit. This is what I like to wear. And having this continuing, like, just do that, be more of that. And so even when we think about TV personalities and individuals that we're most attracted to, it's often those people that are living so loudly with themselves.
I guess, Heather, that's my question. Like what you're saying is making a lot of sense to me because I think a lot about like community and how it gets how it gets like dangerous sometimes or turns into groupthink or turns into whatever. And what you said just really hit home for me. Like, Hey Birdie and this type of intention allows people to be more of themselves, where I think perhaps other communities, like some religions or high control groups or I even think some of my friends are in these dating groups and they have so many rules. And I'm just like, okay, so are you in a community or are you like following a set of rules, right? And what you're saying is this community really encourages people to be their fullest expression versus be a certain type of person doing a certain type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Hannah, is a high control group the new verbiage for cult?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, like the Mormons don't love to hear themselves called the cult, right? But
Actually, they don't even want to be called the Mormons anymore. They rebranded. So now they'd like
What
you to
is
call
their
them the Church of
brand?
the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Mhm.
LDS.
Yeah. They'd like you to call them LDS because
LDS.
people don't know the connection. I can say this because I'm a former Mormon. So,
Mm.
oh, did you? They were like, oh, no wonder.
It's a new version of FOMO.
That's what I think. I think FOMO is like the best abbrev for
Former Mormon.
Yeah, former Mormon. Yeah.
I do want to add on. I agree with Heather that it's disconnection of self, but back to what we were saying, Jane, of disconnection of community.
Yeah.
And that you can see all these external things of I could be or should be this. And there's a lot of fear that paralyzes people to do that. And so if you can be in a communal, healthy, not high control space that allows you to play in what Heather was describing and still feel that sense of safety and being seen and being held and just your flock admiring, wow, go for it and encouraging you rather than trying to figure out from all the external forces coming in, where do I go? What do I do?
And it makes me think too, like, I think from my experience as a therapist, particularly working, I do a lot of retreat style stuff. Like groups can be really triggering for people, right? Because a lot of us have had experiences with groups, particularly groups of women that have not felt good. And so what you're saying, Jess, like where it's safe, you're like rewiring what it means to be in a group, right?
Yes. And with our particular flock, Hannah, that you were part of, called Find Your Flock, which is a group of women that come in from all over and land in this space together. You in that have no investment. If Sally changes how she chooses to host parties at her house, as an example, you can be there in a supportive role of Sally go, right? Where if Sally were in a group of her neighborhood friends and she's always the host and she's like, guys, I actually don't even really enjoy hosting, that impacts all of them. And they potentially might be like, no, Sally, you need to stay who you are to allow all of us to be who we are. Where in a certain elements of flock, it allows you to test out those new identities that you want to try on without feeling like, well, if I do that, Hannah's going to not eat and that's going to ruin her life.
Yeah, 100%.
So Jess and Heather, in all this talk about community and sustainability of community, beyond Flight Club, help us understand the other offerings that you have, things that you've been doing with your community that are exciting, things that you have coming up that are exciting.
We would love to touch on something we're really excited about that we are calling the womb. Essentially, and Jess was just speaking about this as far as this feeling of disconnection or fear or this desire to not feel so alone in your hopelessness or helplessness. So there's this overwhelming chaos in the air, if you will, in this new.
What are you talking about?
I feel great.
I mean, maybe you felt it. Maybe you felt it.
I have no idea.
It seems to be especially present in our community.
Yes, it is. My
As far
parents would
as-
not agree.
Same here.
Things are
Same
great.
Here. So we were discussing just this consistent, like literally almost this Groundhog Day of what the fuck. This Groundhog Day of what the fuckness. Where we're like, all right, this is enough is enough. We need to do what we do well, which is bring women together so that we're not feeling so alone or helpless or hopeless in any way, and really create an experience with ritual and ceremony, with some movement, with our voices, and bring in representation of the areas that we feel are impacted the most currently. So we are bringing together women for this experience to not feel so alone, helpless, or hopeless, and create this pathway for action and opportunity. So we're inviting representation from areas of immigration, women's reproductive rights, the LGBTQ plus community, and the environment, as well as awareness of legislative change and what is it within our reach as far as what else can we do? Whether we want to get out of our homes or not, whether we want to do more than send a donation here or there. What can we do? What's within our reach? So the womb is inspired or has been created to do just that.
I want to pick up where Heather just said inspired. The womb concept, or calling it the womb, is a little break from brand since it's not bird related, and inspired by the author Valerie Kaur, Kaur. She wrote The Sage Warrior, and it is just about the Sikh religion and the history of it and then her navigating it. But she says, what if we look at the space that we're in now as a womb instead of a tomb? That the darkness is gestation and growth and not suffocation and isolation. Wow. And when that was shared with us by a woman that attended our Power of Pleasure event, the level of like light that it provided, and we hadn't read the book yet, but that of like, oh my gosh, yes, that is another way for us to look at this instead of, and not bypass what is happening by offering the space of healing and community and activation, whether on a micro or macro level or not at all, but just knowing that you're surrounded by other people.
And I think it's huge. I mean, I don't know about you, Jane, but like, I don't know if I have one more like Trump session in me, another like Trump therapy session. Like it's just been like one thing after another. And what from a therapist lens, like sitting on one-on-one with someone, it's like, yeah, like like this is a normal feeling, right? This is a normal reaction. But I think I just want to commend y'all because you doing it at a community level, I think makes it so much more accessible where people are so resigned and tired and scared and burnt out from a nervous system perspective, like that's shut down, right? And so to make it a little bit more accessible, to make it easier on people to do it in community, to not have to research what to do and just show up, I think is huge. So I think it's amazing what you're doing.
Thanks, Hannah. A few months ago, or January maybe, we started the True North as a resource spot where people could pick in and get engaged in ways that felt accessible for them. And then with the intention right now of evolving into the womb of let's come together in person so that people don't feel alone.
And I think that's one of the tactics, right? Is isolation, loneliness, overwhelm, disconnect. I'm not saying anything radical here besides like, that's one of the ways that we stop trying, stop engaging. And community can be a pretty beautiful act of protest and refusal, you know? Do you all have a timeline for this? Are you thinking like summer, fall?
June 11th.
Perfect.
At a location in Denver.
Perfect. And it's do you envision like an ongoing community building thing, a one evening event?
So this will be an evening event to gather, to connect as community. And then from there, there'll be different opportunities that will spread out as far as choice amongst the participants on what they want to do and how they want to continue to engage. And then we'll revisit what this might look like as it's birthed.
We're confident that we're going to have to do it every year for the next 4 years.
At least once a year, right?
Yeah. And then how this likely converts after that.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Maybe this is a leading question. I mean, you know, I'm at the point where in my own process, and Jane, we've talked about this, like, I think sometimes maybe in the past, there's been fear, especially for women and especially in the climate to speak out and be an advocate and, you know, do activism. Being on like in a leadership role, creating this brand, was there any hesitancy at all to make it so clear, to make the activism and advocacy so clear? Or were you like, this is just a values thing?
Yes, there was absolutely hesitancy and resistance. I mean, Jess and I as partners, Jess, I will take an idea or a passion and I will nurture it. And just, what was that cartoon? I'm going to name it George and I will love it and kiss it and hug it. And this is what I will do is like caress this idea or this passion or this desire where together, like we'll express this desire and what needs to happen and Jess will birth it immediately and she'll run with it. So for me, pre-election, it was this, I'm not sure that we can say this. There is so much hostility and tension and anger. If we come out and say, this is who we are, it could really backfire on us. So we paused and in fact, I won't say we necessarily paused. We were like, well, let's focus on what we can do, which is vote. So let's say, here's the action that we're encouraging and here's what you can do. And this is how you can get involved. After the election, when it was, okay, this is the situation, was for me at least, I was like, okay, now we have to do something. Mm-hmm. We have to be a source, a resource, a guiding light even for what we can do now that this is the situation. Mm-hmm. So yes, there was apprehension.
I think it's a hard thing to balance when you're in these type of communities because like all of us are rooted in compassion and open-mindedness and curiosity, right? And so to be open, but also to know like some of this shit is just morally incorrect, right? It can feel hard to balance it. So I was just wondering what your all's experiences were with that.
And ultimately, we still need to be able to engage with one another, even if we have a difference of opinions. I think you started off saying, Hannah, that your parents are fine with this. My parents are fine with this. So even I personally need to continue to find ways to relate and speak to what I'm scared of and what I need, and also hear and appreciate and understand and be compassionate for what they're believing.
Yeah.
So it's new territory that we're in. And I think all of the programming that we have done and leading up to this is supportive of this as far as what do we do now? And how do we continue to have compassion for one another?
Yeah.
It's an interesting thought though, Hannah. I've heard other people say all people are in different levels or perceived levels of safety when it comes to speaking out, right? So if I don't have, depending on my immigration status, depending on my gender, my sexuality, my gender expression, my history, the color of my skin, I'm into different levels of safety. And a lot of that is very real. And some of it is I don't actually know how safe I am. So I think it's an interesting concept. Women are historically a little bit less safe, are a lot less safe to speak out. A little bit less. What am I talking about? Women historically are a lot less safe to speak out. And then there's groups of women now that are safer, so it's an interesting discussion. And I think holding compassion for wherever our community is at in terms of, I can't speak out because I might get deported means that maybe I, who will not get deported, need to stand up and speak out a little bit more,
Yeah, 100%.
So in addition to the Big Womb event, which we'll keep all of our listeners informed about, what else? You've talked about some like movement groups, and I know you guys offer some like transitional sort of ritual ceremony offerings. Can you tell us more about that?
Our next annual event coming up is the Maternal Burn on May 4th, and it's on Sunday. And we are partnering with a dear friend named Lori, and she's an Ayurvedic practitioner and doula and just female of magic. And it's our spin on Mother's Day. So similar, I think last time we talked about power of pleasure, and that's our spin on Valentine's Day. But that on Mother's Day itself can be a very heavy holiday. So what we do on May 4th in the Maternal Burn is really dive into the maternal archetype and how it isn't just someone who's birthed children. It could be a mother of an idea, a mother of art, a mother of dogs or cats, a stepmom. It could be how your mom shows up in your life or didn't show up in your life, and creating that space to allow that processing in community. And within that, we weave in ritual and authentic relating, and we usually set something on fire. Not a human, not a sacrifice, but an old way of being.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, maybe that could be an inaugural thing that we do. Just kidding.
Just kidding.
So something I think about a lot is this idea of like authenticity and belonging, how we're bred to be a part of the group. That's how we're safe. But also, especially what we're talking about culturally, roles, expectations of women in particular, that belonging doesn't really feel authentic. So what would you say to someone who's listening that's like, I want this, but I'm afraid I don't belong? How do you guys see the interplay between authenticity and belonging in the work that you do?
I'm thinking so much of this program that we're actually currently running called the Spring Migration. So like birds, we migrate twice a year. We migrate in the spring and we migrate in the fall. And in the spring, our focus is so much more on the external, on the emergence, on awakening and rising. And in doing this, and feeling like, because there is so much of a belonging or even a becoming in the process, what we're doing is looking inward to do that. And I think even when we were talking earlier about faux connection and how connected we are and how influenced we are by all these things, is that we often don't take enough time to turn inward to actually find the answers. And so there's so much self-trust and inward reflection, ritual and ceremony that's necessary to really feel that. And I think because we have so much access to so much information, and we're in social media and all the things that we're doing, we're so distracted, and we're not taking as much time to find the answers that we're seeking within. Because I think all of that love, understanding, appreciation, belonging comes from inside of us. And I think we're so focused on the external that we skip that step.
Well, and I think too, that's like exactly what I was thinking when I asked you the question. Like, we're kind of told what to be, right? Cultural programming and expectations, especially for women. And so we become these external things, but inside we're dying inside. Or you guys mentioned it in your before, being like the hamster wheel, right? When you're doing all these things you're supposed to be doing, but inside you want more, because I think there's so much expectation on what we need to be versus like what's actually going on inside of us, right?
I wonder how many people actually have a statement or feeling, a sensation in their body that they identify as belonging. To even know if that is a feeling of, oh, I don't belong in this space, or is it a feeling of anxiety? Am I scared? And is it easier to say, I don't belong in this space because you can leave it? Versus if you don't understand what belonging means in you, can you belong anywhere?
I think we could unpack that.
I feel like that could take us,
especially from a therapist point of view and a nervous system point of view, what we feel, what kind of experiences we've had around belonging and authenticity and the safety of being authentic in a space. Because part of Hannah, what I'm hearing you getting at is authenticity and community at odds, right? Like if I'm truly myself and I truly get to express myself, can I still be in community? Am I safe in community? What community am I safe in? And I think not a lot of people have the experience of I was either different or unique or fully, truly expressed myself and everybody rallied around me, you know, like maybe might happen in Flight Club and said, yes, go do that, you know?
Yeah. Like it's not encouraged from a really small age, right? Like sit in the desk, do the things, dress like this. And then we get to be 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever. And we're like, I feel like a robot, you know, because like we kind of are programmed to be.
Or how do I fit if I don't have that desk? If I don't have that person's friend telling me how?
Yes.
Can I find myself here?
Yes. And that's kind of reminding me of like, okay, if I'm not at work excelling at what I do well, like who am I outside of that identity, right?
All right. A question for you all as we wrap up. If somebody is like, man, this sounds awesome, this kind of community really speaks to me, but it's not for me, or I'm not a good fit, what would you say to somebody who has some hesitancy around that?
I would want to ask why.
Yeah.
What's the resistance? What's the hesitation? Where is the discomfort coming from?
Don't sit in that isolation. Call us. Have a Zoom chat with us. We're open to sitting in that space with you.
Yeah. And I think too, not to like totally therapize, but like that's the whole thing, right? Like how many of us had a parent who sat down and asked us why we were scared or why we were sad, right? And like was there and just explored that with us. So even if you are not at all interested in Hey Birdie, get on a call with Heather or Jess and just have a corrective experience around someone being curious about you. I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, the feedback that we get sometimes is that, and we mentioned we're not a book club or a wine club or you're not coming and learning a certain skill set that you're going to take back to your life. But you will learn more about who you are and what you love and what you don't want anymore. And you'll be supported in that discovery process, and you'll be held accountable, and you'll be encouraged. So if that sounds appealing,
do it.
Do it.
Heather and Jess, as always, this was just as insightful as a conversation as our last one. Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited about the offerings that you have coming up and the events that you have coming up. They're just so timely and so important.
Okay, so we have an ending question that's fun. We'll just back it on up. So a super fun ending question. The one rule about Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. What is the one rule of Flight Club?
You talk about it.
You squawk about it. You squawk about it to everyone you know.
Chirp, chirp, chirp. Love it. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you. What if the fire inside you wasn't something to quiet, but something to honor?
The maternal burn is not a workshop. It's a ceremony, a descent, a release, a radiant return.
We'll move through the womb journey together, from shadow to spark, from holding it all to letting it go.
This is for mothers of all kinds, of children, yes, but also of dreams, of art, of selves.
If your body is calling for a reset, not to fix, but to remember,
you belong here. Join us for the maternal burn.
You've been listening to Are We Happy Yet? A Green Roof Studios production. This episode was recorded and produced by Hannah Buzzo and Jane Thatcher Hahn.
If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with someone you care about. Your support helps us reach more listeners. And for every rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we're donating to a charity connected to one of our guests. Check the show notes for more details on this month's featured charity.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.